Becoming a successful professional speaker is a journey. How do you find that first stage, the next stage, and then the bigger and better stages? I'm Lee Hayes, your host. My co-hosts and I are here to guide you to a more successful speaking career. You're listening to Path to the Main Stage podcast. For all those speakers who want to be authors, here's the podcast you need to listen to. If you didn't listen to last week's already, please do, because today is part 2. We're having AJ Harper join us again, who is an editor, author, instructor, past editor. Like she knows this industry really well. And here's what's exciting. Today, let me double check my calendar, is January 28 when we are recording. That is important because she co-authored a book with Mike Michalowicz that was released yesterday, and it surpassed 10,000 units sales already, which we'll talk about. Is that good? Is it not good? Does it matter? Let's just say she does this for real. So listen, you're going to learn a lot. Last week, what we talked about was how to write a book, the steps, the process, little of the pain, little of the fun, what it takes to actually get that book published. Mm-hmm. But today, I think, is as important, maybe more important, which is how do you sell the darn thing? I want to talk about marketing. So thank you for joining me again, AJ. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. And I think it is just as important. If you're serious about, a book that people will actually read and that has a real impact on your speaking career, you got to sell it. Can't just write it and publish it.
And I think that a lot of people, some authors I've talked to, when it's their first book, they go, okay, the book is being published on such and such a date. That's when I start marketing. And I thought, no, we got to look at this, because I believe you need to start a whole lot earlier. So if you are planning a book and you're like, I'm going to write this book, when do you start thinking about how you're going to market it?
When you start writing it, or even before.
Okay, what would you do before writing it?
So much. Oh my God. And it all depends on also which path you're choosing and the goals that you have. So for example, before we started today, we were talking about national bestseller lists. Mm-hmm. That USA Today, New York Times, and then there's some smaller lists that are national bestsellers lists that most people don't know about, but they exist. So if that was a goal, you would need a different type of planning than if you had, say, for example, just an ROI goal, meaning I would like to sell X number of books to make back the investment I made publishing this book or marketing this book. Or maybe you have an impact or outreach goal. So it just kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So the first thing I would do is make that decision.
All right. So, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about both, but what if we start with, I just want to sell books. Like, I want to sell as many books as I can. We'll worry about the list separately and explain why they're important or not important. But I just want to sell lots of books, AJ. Where do I start that my book's going to actually get ordered or taken off a shelf?
Okay, well, if you want your book on shelves, then you're going to have to make sure you have the right distribution to ensure that it's actually on shelves.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to be something that people could order from a bookstore versus, say, find on the shelf in a bookstore. So there's a distinction there. So otherwise, it'll be available with retailers online everywhere, even if you're self-publishing. But the thing that I would do is think about who else serves your reader, who else cares about the mission that you have, who else helps your reader make the change that you promise, the types of groups, individuals, organizations, types of people who serve. So for example, let's say that you had, let's take Mike's book, The Money Habit. Okay, so he has people who never want to worry about money again. Who else serves them besides Mike? Financial planners, CPAs, counselors, attorneys, debt consolidation groups, people who help you get first-time home buyers. All these are just some examples, right? They also help that same reader. And so then think about how can you get leverage those types of groups and relationships to help you sell more books so that they're actually helping you do it. And what people make a mistake of doing is relying on social media marketing and their own network, and they think that's going to be enough. But you have to really brainstorm, who else serves my reader? How can I get them to help me sell the book? And I would do a lot of strategic thinking about that while I'm writing it.
So you want to start forming these relationships right off the bat, even if you start, as you start writing it, is that?
Yep. Yep. At a minimum, you want to create a strategy and figure out which groups you want to get in front of at a minimum. It might take you longer to develop relationships, but if you can provide value to them, a training, a speech, for example, a webinar, or some sort of material they can use, then they're more apt to help you sell that book.
Okay, and that's starting, so right as you start writing it, you're going to start before you're thinking about it. Before you start writing it, is it also possible, and this is not really part of marketing, sort of marketing adjacent, can you gauge interest in your book, or should you try to gauge interest in your book before you start to write it? Because I just imagine that if somebody said, Lee, I've got this great idea for a book, it's how to be effective at using a fax machine. I might go, like, is that really going to sell? Is there a big market for that? So how can you tell if the idea you have has any commercial value? Is there any way to know that?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can test. I think it's good to get your fundamentals straight, and we talked about that in the last episode. The who's your reader, how you define them, and the way you define them is by their primary desire and that what they perceive stands in the way. And so if you can articulate and get in front of groups, or you even use your own social media or email list to say, does this resonate with you? Do you have this problem? Do you have this desire? Then you know you're kind of on the right track. You can also test your messaging. And then if within your book, if you're doing prescriptive nonfiction, if you have, say, an exercise, a small framework, a process, you can test drive that in little, free or for a low cost actual test drives of people coming to learn that from you to see how much interest is there in that.
And what about building community? How important is that? Either on social media or different.
It's essential because the author's greatest asset is their mailing list. So, you want to build community. You have to decide, where does it live? Community on social media is not really a community. I would make an exception for that, might be on Substack, because it's a newsletter platform that has a social media component. And so the people who are responding are your subscribers, which is technically a community. But the world at large is not your community. And that's what happens on social media. So you have to decide where are you giving them a home. But you can have a community in your email. It's just that they aren't necessarily communicating with each other. You're the only one who's communicating. So you'll have to make some sort of decision about where does your community live? A Facebook group, on Circle, on Slack, maybe a Substack like we mentioned. That is important. But there's also your author community, and that's the other thing I would do while I'm writing the book, and that's a marketing move. And that's get to know other authors, support them, promote them, see how you can help them, and so that they become part of your network and they help sell your book when the time comes. For example, Mike did a 12-hour event yesterday for The Money Habit. The most impressive thing he's ever done for a launch, I would say. I was on that for a short time, but so were some very big deal authors, right? And those are his friends. Those are his author friends, his author community. And there's a thing among authors called literary citizenship. And it's where you, now that you're an author, even if you're just writing the book for the first time, you have to think of yourself this way. There's responsibilities that we have as authors in keeping tabs of our author friends. How can we support them? Leaving reviews, helping them promote, being supportive and giving them introductions. And you can start that while you're writing. It's important to build it. It's very hard to build it fast right before a launch because it's like any relationship. It's not something you're going to do overnight.
And I heard you say, so now you have a podcast. Again, if anybody missed that last time, it's called Don't Write That Book, which is AJ and Mike Michalowicz, and they talk about details, week after week, about what not to do and what to do to write a great book. And one thing you mentioned there is that authors can raise each other. It's not a competitive market. If somebody reads, like my husband, for instance, he loves home repair, home building, and all this. If he buys one book, he'll buy 20 books on the same subject. It's not that one bumps another. If you're interested in a topic, you'll buy more and more. Is that something you found that authors with similar topics can raise each other?
They do, yeah. I think it's very short-sighted to be competitive with other authors, period. They're your friends, they're your peers, they're people who can open doors for you. They're people who can help you navigate sometimes treacherous and confusing waters of publishing. They're people who can amplify your efforts. I've seen it happen time and time and time again. I know authors who their entire career was made because of another author lifting them up. So, this is what you need to also be doing, that work and reaching out. Even authors that are successful love it when people are supporting them. So there's a lot of things you can do. It doesn't cost anything. To start connecting with authors, supporting them, and participating in their own efforts so that you can build that network. If you start thinking, I'm in competition with this author because we write something similar, you're already shooting yourself in the foot.
No, great thing to know. So look for authors, right, with similar topics. Get in with them as a community. Now, so pre-launch, and we'll talk about maybe really launch separately, but pre-launch, what are some marketing tactics maybe that you've used that have been successful in starting to build this interest? And sorry, I'm going to jump in with another question here. Pre-orders. So when do you put your book out for pre-orders? And I guess what I'm talking about now is this pre-order or pre-order stage. What are some things you've done?
Well, first of all, you should be planting your flag about your book's topic long before there's even a pre-order stage. And that just means talking about it in different circles, maybe speaking. Mike's been speaking on The Money Habit for a long time, way before the book was available for pre-order. There's also, articles, columns, things like that. So you're planting your flag on your ideas, your messaging, long before the book comes out. A lot of authors mistakenly think they have to hoard all that until the book comes out. They're afraid people are going to steal things. They're afraid they're going to, burn it out. Not so. You need to plant the flag. So that's one thing. Pre-orders, again, totally depend on your goals. So, for example, if you were trying to make a national list, you have to get a certain number of pre-orders in to make that work. So for some people, it's not as relevant. There's also odd things you have to consider when you're self-publishing to make sure you have enough stock and so forth. But I think, I was on the phone with Todd Stadderson the other day. He is a publisher at Bard Press. They're famous for publishing the one thing. They only publish one book a year, and they're completely focused on that author for that year. So their marketing efforts are, it's a real collaboration, which you don't normally get to have with a publisher. And he said to me, I really think you need to sell at least 1,000 books out of the gate. So that's the number he's picking, right? But it depends. The pre-order decisions you make depend on the goals you have. So the other thing about pre-orders is if you're traditionally published or you have trade distribution, there's a window of time when you're working on getting your book to market, so you're in different stages of the editorial work and production, that the sales team is also working on getting your book on shelves. And it's not a democracy. They're going to focus on the books they think they have the most buzz, the most chance at being successful. So it's almost like if the book already is looking exciting, then they're going to put gasoline on that fire. So you're part of your job, if you do have trade distribution, a sales team that's out there trying to get your book on shelves, is to get their attention. And so getting pre-orders, consistent work on that can really, really help you to get their attention, and they start to see, wait, who's this person? They keep selling, they keep selling. And now they want to pour gasoline on that fire for you and do more for you. So that's another thing. A lot of authors don't know about this, and they never know about it. So they think the sales team is giving them equal treatment with every other author. They're not. So you got to kind of have to, like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So that's another reason to get pre-orders, is to get the attention of the people who are out there trying to get your book on shelves.
And if you're traditionally published, how much help can you expect from the publisher as far as marketing goes? You just mentioned sales and getting things on shelves. How much promotion are they going to do for you?
So they're not going to do, unless it's written into your contract specifically, they're not going to do much for you that's front facing. So when we think of marketing, we say publishers don't do anything, but that's because what we are expecting is things like advertising and organizing book tours and stuff that you can see. They are actually doing marketing work. They're just doing it within the industry behind the scenes. And that is unfortunate because they don't tell you about it, right? So they are doing things for you, but they're not communicating it. They're just terrible communicators. Okay. So then you end up feeling like they're not doing anything for me. They know they're doing something for you, but you feel like they're not. What authors want is for publishers to give them a marketing plan and tell them exactly what to do and pay for advertising and make it all happen. And that's not what they're doing. Their job behind the scenes is to make sure the industry is hip to your book and cares about your book, and that it's getting into the right hands behind the scenes. So you might think they're not doing anything, but they are. They're just not doing the thing you want them to do. The thing you want them to do is ultimately your responsibility.
Yeah, so they don't do a lot of, I guess, visible marketing like the social media and all those things that you think about. Okay. Yeah. So now, you mentioned before an email list is everything, right? It's so important to have that list. So everyone, you should be gathering your list, have a CRM or like MailChimp or any one of those. What are some things you can do? Obviously, you can just shoot out an email, but what are some methods maybe you've used in the past that caught attention, that moved the needle? What are some techniques you use through email?
To sell actual books, to get pre-orders?
To get pre-orders, yeah.
So if you've already primed your audience so that they are excited about the book, they'll rally for you when it's time to pre-order, but then you need to use incentives. So what kind of bonuses and other types of things can you give them because they pre-ordered a certain time? What kind of bonuses can you give them if they purchase a number of books? So it's really more about incentivizing them versus just continually saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. Yeah.
And what are some extras that are out there? I know, again, with the Money Habit that came out, I believe there are like this extra material, bonus material that was not published in the book, but is pertinent, but just sort of didn't make the cut, but now you can get it as part of the bonus. What are some other bonus items or incentive items that might interest a person? What are some things you used?
I think it's good to have some easy stuff that doesn't cost you anything and that you can keep delivering. So think digital. Like, okay, if you buy a copy of the book, I'll also give you the audiobook, or I'll also give you the PDF for you to read on your device. Things like that can just automatically happen, and it's not going to cost you anything. But then for a limited number of people, you can do things that involve your time or might require money. So for example, maybe they get a signed book, or maybe they get another book with it. Maybe they get free access to a training. Maybe they get to come to a mastermind or a book club or get time with you. So you can have different tiers of bonuses, But I still think people should always have an easy, just even for buying one book bonus that's digital, so that people get some little extra thing and you can just automatically deliver it without any effort or expense.
Okay, you mentioned different tiers. So does that mean there's, like, with one book you get a digital something? And then is it if you buy 5, if you buy 10, how do you, what sort of tiers have you used?
It depends. If we mentioned Mike, he studied which tiers are the best tiers that, people like to have. I personally, I'll figure out my tiers based on how many books are in a case. That's how I do it.
Okay.
So I'll find out from the publisher how many books are going to be in a case, and then I'll do it based on case, so that if I have to ship books myself or ask my publisher to ship it, we aren't having to take books out to, like, oh, let me do a case plus two books. That's awkward. It costs more money. So that's one thing. As I just go based on case, but I think, you can also look at how some other authors do their tiers and see what tends to work.
And aside from the email, have you done, the big question is going to be paid advertising, and how successful or unsuccessful has that been?
So I personally haven't. My publisher did do some for me. I know there are people who swear by it, and I'm sure that they're right. I just also know there's a lot of people who waste a lot of money doing it. And I think it depends on your book. There's some books that it's great for you to do paid advertising, but there's other books it's just not going to make any sense. I personally am not super knowledgeable about it by choice, because sometimes you're thinking, okay, I know this is changing so fast because the way paid ads work is just always shifting. I won't be able to stay on top of that to be super knowledgeable. So I just made a choice. I'm not going to be an ad person. So you just have to find someone who's got a really good reputation.
Well, I think just, my 2 cents here is I was talking to a group, one of these mastermind groups. And now this is not book selling, but what he said was, I spent $15,000 over 12 months to get new members, to attract people. And he said, I did not get a single member off of a paid ad, $15,000. So my 2 cents, because I've also done paid advertising for different things, is that it's not, just because Google Ads goes, we'll give you $1,000 worth of free ads or whatever. You absolutely have to know where your market is, what they're looking at, and put the ad right in front of the right person. Just because you're getting a great deal for, a zillion people who are out there, if they're not the right people, it doesn't matter. And I think it's the same thing with social media. I get suggestions all the time. We can help you get 200,000 followers within 60 days for this much money. I don't care, because the followers they want to get me aren't the people who are interested in me. They're just looking for numbers. And I think it's quality over quantity. And I think the same thing is with advertising. If the ad's not in the right place in front of the right person, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's other things you could spend money on when it comes to book marketing that a lot of people don't know about. For example, I think BookBub is an excellent resource, and that the BookBub gives discounts or free ebooks, so deeply discounted or free ebooks, to the people who sign up for their service. So what they have are curated lists, and they're separated by category. So for example, there's people who are only interested in self-help, or only interested in romantasy, or only interested in religious books, right? So they sign up for this service. They have so many people signed up for it. And then what you do as an author is sign up for a BookBub deal. And if you're selected, which is a process, then you pay a certain fee. But every author I've worked with who's been selected, they've had thousands of downloads of their ebook during that time. That's an example of what is technically, it's not paid advertising, but it kind of is. That works because these are people who have already signed up to get books. So,
okay. And I'm just looking this up. So it's BookBub, BookBub.com.
Yeah, BookBub. And so they don't always accept everybody. It's an editorial decision, but it doesn't cost anything to submit.
So you may as well try. Okay.
You might as well try. And at the most you're going to spend, I don't know, $500, $600, $700. It depends on the list. How big is the list? How competitive is it? I think it's really worth doing. You're getting right in front of readers, which is what you were saying earlier. How do you even know if your ad is getting in front of people? So I think that's an example of paid advertising that makes sense.
Fantastic. All right. So that's a great thing. Now, say we did a pre-launch, or even if a pre-launch wasn't done, you mentioned yesterday Mike Michalowicz had this huge launch event, and I've heard of launch parties. What are some things people can do on launch day to move the needle?
So Mike definitely moved the needle with his 12-hour event for sure. So I think the main thing is to think about how you're going to provide value for people. People make the mistake, they decide to do a party or a Zoom call, but there's nothing happening there that would attract anyone except your people who care about you. So if you're really trying to get people to buy books that haven't already bought books, then you're going to have to provide some sort of value. It's also, you can think about an event as just bringing buzz and awareness and having people talk about you. But honestly, decide, are you going to try and sell books at your event? Because then you need a big thing like Mike did, which is providing a lot of value. Or is it just celebratory, which is fine if you want to do it that way. Just as enjoy the fact that you made it to that moment, celebrate the people who are on your team, take a lot of pictures and video you can use for social media later, and leave it at that. So that's, again, this is just all comes down to goals. But you don't have to do a party. You don't. Mike's actually never done a party. I still wish he would do an actual party.
Because you guys on his team deserve a party, but that's something separate.
I think he does too, but he just doesn't. I said just to, I remember for my book, Write a Must Read, I did a 3-hour event similar to Mike's, which was also, we used the same system he used. This was years ago. And what I did was short panel discussions with authors so I could highlight them. I did laser coaching. I did a lot of value, and that was true to my ethics. I don't want authors who are listening to this to think they have to do what everyone does. I think you have to think about what's meaningful to you. For me, it was to provide value and to highlight the authors I work with. But then that night I had a little party in the backyard with my family. That's, I wanted a cake with my book cover on it, and my wife got one for me, and it was nice. So I think there's a celebratory element as well that sometimes we miss when we try to commodify the party itself. It's okay to just say, yay me.
Excellent. No, I love that perspective on it, because here I'm so focused on sales and I'm going, you're right. It is important to enjoy the moment because you've worked so hard for it.
Yeah.
Now, celebration, but advertising. One thing I want to comment on, just because I know multiple speakers who've done this when they've launched their books, and that is the billboard in Times Square. I'm only mentioning it because each person that I've talked to who's done it, and I can think of 2 pictures off the top of my head, but I've talked to other people who've done it. It costs thousands of dollars for seconds on this board, just long enough for you to be there and get your picture taken. Yeah. And as far as I know, no one sold a book off of it.
No one sells. You don't sell a book from that. That's a vanity metric.
It is, but, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, is understand that if you want that vanity moment where your picture is in Times Square and you are in front of it, that's what you're going to get is your moment, but you're not selling books. So just make sure, that people have a realistic view of what that is, because people are going to try to sell you that and probably tell you, well, you're going to get 1 million views from this, but you're not going to sell it.
Doesn't translate to book sales.
Right. So just wanted to throw that out there. Now, what about post-launch? So you've launched, you've either had your fun party or you've worked all day long to get books going. Do you stop marketing, or when do you stop? Do you ever stop marketing?
No.
So what do you do post-launch?
I think most authors, by the time they get to 1 year post-launch, and I do mean this, I do mean most authors, they've stopped. And maybe they occasionally do something like, hey, they remember they had a book and they might put up a social media post, or it's my 1 year book anniversary, but they're not actively trying to sell it. You need a post-launch plan. You need to keep working to meet those groups of people who can help you sell the book. You need to keep going into different areas. What happens is we tend to sell to our network, our circle, and then we just keep selling to them. But they already know about the book. So you have to actually go out there and get into other groups. Speaking is, in fact, one of the best ways to do that. You need a strategic plan so that you can sell more books. It's not going to happen like magic.
Well, speaking definitely is one method. I can definitely talk to that I know there are many events I'll talk about placing a speaker, and they'll say, oh, well, if they sell a book, right, that's the next thing. We buy books for our attendees. We buy books for the audience. And I know there are authors that won't speak unless there are books of theirs at the event. Gino Wickman is one of these. And I know Gino Wickman, he's written testimonials for Mike, and they've worked together. But I've placed him in events, and he said, everyone in that room will have my book in their lap or I don't go.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? They hire him and they buy the books. Mike, when I've placed him, I think the last 10 events I've placed him for, I've said, and you buy books for this. And they've all gone, okay, So definitely speaking is a great way to move books. And I don't know if quite as effective, but I know one way to get other people's audiences is podcasting. Not necessarily starting your own, because let me speak to this. When you start your own, you start at zero. And I know you've been there too. You start with no listeners, but other people's audiences are very valuable and they'd love to have you on. There are a lot of places that talk about authors and have them talk about their books. And I think that's one great method. And
yeah, I mean, so Michael Bungay Stanier, who wrote The Coaching Habit, his strategy for that book and after launch was to do, I think it was a podcast a week. I might have the number wrong, but he did that for a year. So he kept doing it. So you can use the strategy of blowing out and doing a ton of podcasts at launch, but then people sort of drop off. But think about when you listen to podcasts, you're kind of listening to the most recent version. Now you've got all your podcasts down in 6 months ago. And unless people are doing deep dives in a podcast, they might not actually be catching yours. So I think a podcast plan of, I'm going to try and do a minimum of, I'm going to do 2 podcasts a month for the next 2 years. Right? Just set the goal. And that way you can systematize the outreach. So, this is what I need to do to support my book. And you're not letting it fall off.
Okay. But I know, yeah, and speaking certainly gives a lot of life. Profit First came out over a decade ago. I'm not even sure now. And that is still selling, from what I understand, very well. And
Yes.
a lot of that comes from speaking, but that book just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. I don't think there was any point where Mike just said, you know what, we're just not going to push that one anymore.
I mean, the reason why that book works, there's so many reasons why that book has sold so many copies. Part of it is the book itself. Part of it is the idea, the title, the storytelling. There's a lot of factors with the book itself. But also there was a whole business infrastructure set up, Profit First Professionals, that helps it. The speaking, and then of course Mike has people who speak on Profit First, not just him. So that is a game changer when other people are also speaking on the book that you're selling is kind of amazing. So there's a lot of reasons why that book continues to sell.
And what about that? Now this is probably going beyond marketing of a book, but I know Profit First allows licensing of derivatives of that book. And maybe unless your book is big, that's not going to happen. But I think it's an interesting thing to look at, not just derivative books, but like you said, a coaching program that might go with it or a company that might go with it. How does that work?
I mean, it just depends on what you're trying to do. But anytime that you have a business that is based around the intellectual property that's in your book, you're going to sell more books. You just are. So Mike has a certification program, Profit First Professionals. All of those people are selling copies of Profit First. All of them. Because they're using them in their practices. They're recommending them all the time. It's a no-brainer. They're moving a lot of books. And I'm sure they're moving the money habit now. Mm-hmm. So they're gonna keep moving books. He does have a bunch of derivatives, so Profit First for, a bunch of them have been my students. Profit First for photographers, Profit First for landscapers, Profit First for real estate investors. It goes on and on. Profit First for therapists. Profit First for therapists is one of my students, Julie Harris, and she's sold well over 15,000 copies of that super niche, tiny niche book that she self-published. And then for Mike, that doesn't just sell, that also ends up selling Profit First too.
Right, because there's only a minimal overlap of material, really, right?
Well, it's mostly just because people want to see the source material
Mhm.
and it's, but also that's additional income that's not royalty based for him because he has the licensee income.
Okay. And but you brought up just another really good point that I want to examine here with marketing and selling your book is what's good. So you just mentioned she sold 15,000, which is really good because it's such a niche area. What is good? Like, what is a good run if you're self-published? What is a good run for prescriptive nonfiction? I realize, not everybody's going to be J.K. Rowling, but that's a different kind of book. But for this genre that authors are usually going to, or speakers who are authors are going to do, which is this prescriptive nonfiction, what's good? Like, what is a reasonable expectation?
Well, good and reasonable expectation are completely different.
Okay, let's
And
look at the various steps there. What are different levels people can expect for different reasons?
so, this is such a hard question because, again, the book is a factor. Is it more of a mainstream book? Yes, you can sell more copies of that. So the book matters. If you self-publish matters. But I'm gonna tell you, if you sell more than any author who sells more than 2,000 books in the lifetime of the book is in the top 5% of all authors.
Okay, well, there was the number I was looking for because I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot, I could see some people going into this going, oh, this is going to become like my income stream. I can retire now. And certainly when you look at ads on social media, that's the impression they give, right? Is write a book. It's so easy. And you're going to have this supplemental income for the rest of your life. But I think if 2,000 is that, like anything above that makes you a one percenter, that I think that puts some frame around it.
Well, part of the reason is people don't know how to sell books and they give up. People quit.
Mhm.
I think I would say at least I'm confident in saying at least 96% of authors give up on their book within the first couple years of it being out. So of course they're not going to get big numbers and they don't really understand how books are sold and they don't want the trade-off. Like you do want to sell all those books but you don't necessarily want to invest the time in it
Mhm.
that is required to do it. It's lightning in a bottle to have a book go into the stratosphere with little effort on the author's part. It's
Right.
just some weird dumb luck of what's happening. That's not going to be typical. And when I tell people these are all the things you're going to have to do to get to the level you want to be in terms of book sales, most of the time they don't really want to deal with it. So it's some of it is about the trade-off. That said, I think people don't try hard enough to sell. I mean, I feel like I would love to see all authors try and get to 10,000 in the first 1 to 2 years.
Mhm.
Because we know from, again, I'm mentioning Todd Statterson here, he did extensive research on nonfiction and the mythical 10,000 number. So that we always used to say in publishing, if you could sell 10,000 books, that publishers will take you seriously. Like, say if you self-published,
Mhm.
can you get to 10,000? Maybe you can get a book deal then for the next one. Can you get to 10,000? That's a respectable number. So he went and investigated that, and he determined that that is correct. You are going to sell way more books over its lifetime if you get to that 10 number within the first year. So just set the goal to do it. Now you're more likely to sell 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 copies because you made that effort in the first year. And you have to be aggressive about it. You're just going to have to do it. If you want the kind of notoriety that a lot of people want.
Okay, so before I go on to the next question, let's just wrap that a little bit. If you had to quickly rattle off like the 5 things authors have to do, these are the
Mm-hmm.
top 5 things you have to do to sell books. What are they?
Relationships with other authors and relationships with people who can help you sell the book. Speaking, I think, is in whatever format. It doesn't have to be on a stage. It could be virtual. It could be, just you got to get out there in some fashion. Mailing list, build that mailing list. Um, I would also say some sort of companion product, service, something that's driving the book sales. And the fifth, right now, podcasts are good. So tie between podcasts and Substack
Mhm.
right now. And if you're listening to this 2 years from now, I might have a different answer. But right now, Substack is a fantastic way for you to build your list, plant your flag, build community, all of it. And I think authors should be there if they like writing and they can do it consistently. If you don't like writing and you can't do it consistently, it's not an option for you, then just move on from it. But it's a really good tool.
Okay, now next question. Best-selling lists. And everything from Amazon, which is very different, and I know it's different components, but a lot of people look at that and go, ooh, I'm an Amazon bestseller. So can you explain what Amazon bestseller means or doesn't mean? And then also lists outside of that. What do they mean? How do you get on them? And does it matter? I know it's a lot of questions, but it all ties together.
An Amazon bestseller list is, I could get it tomorrow for a book that I wrote about my toe. It doesn't, I could. You could get on the list those are category specific. So when you see people say I'm a 21-time Amazon bestseller, they mean they became a bestseller for a couple hours on a Tuesday, in an obscure category. It does not mean they're moving books. You could do it with sometimes as few as 15 books sold. And then the next day it doesn't matter. I think it does matter when you are consistently a bestseller in a category, so that you have the orange flag at the top on the listing, which just instills confidence in buyers. If you just, but not as it's not something you announce. You know, it's just there. People, and I also think people who are of a certain caliber in thought leadership, when they see people touting the fact that they're Amazon bestsellers, it's actually a red flag. It's a ding. Because it shows you don't really know. You're talking about something that, if it happens organically, it's cool, but it's not something you would ever put in a bio. It's not something you would ever brag about, because it really could be just a few books, and it was for one moment in time. So I think people are inflating the power of that. It's just not as cool as people think it is.
And on Amazon, what about being a top Amazon seller? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually a Amazon top 100 books of
That's
all.
That's a whole other thing.
Okay.
That's the next level. If you're in the top 100, you're getting a book deal tomorrow. I'm exaggerating.
Right. But there is that list too, right? The Amazon bestsellers overall.
If you can make that, yes, that's amazing. Yeah, that's a whole nother level. You are selling a lot of books.
Okay. All right. And then outside of Amazon, the rest of the world, there's the, USA Today bestseller, New York Times bestseller. What does some of those mean? What does it take to get on them?
The USA,
and what does it mean and what does it matter?
It does matter to a lot of people. It opens doors. You already mentioned it can open doors with speaking if you're on a certain level. I think it can also open doors with business deals. Some readers really respect it. Bookstores respect it. Librarians respect it. So it does matter. The USA Today bestseller list is a combination of print and digital sales for the top 150 books for the prior week. So that includes everything from recipe books to children's books to all those romantasy books, and then political books and thought leadership. So it's just a grab bag of books. It's all in one list, 150. And it's just the numbers. It's not an editorial decision. It's just pure numbers. So that one comes out, these lists come out on Wednesdays. That comes out on Wednesday. The New York Times list is also based on numbers, but it's also an editorial decision. So they might, even if your book sold more than another book that's on the list, you might not get on it. Also, they are under keep it top secret how they make the decision and how they calculate the sales. It's not as simple as you sold 10,000 books. You have to have sold it in different geographic locations from different types of retailers, indie bookstores, big box, Amazon. It's a whole sort of mysterious grab bag of stuff that you have to do, and it's hard to get on. It's hard to get on.
Well, so they're hard to get on, but boy, it's nice to say you're a bestseller.
When my students hit the New York Times or the USA Today, it is a really good day.
Yeah. That must just be fantastic. I can't imagine. So
it's delightful. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody aim for that. Aim to be a bestseller, or just because you have a book that you need to write. But thank you so much, AJ, for coming on today and telling us how to market. And of course, I've got to end all my podcasts the same way. If you need to go back in time, and maybe this is for anybody who's not seen it, AJ is the author of Write a Must Read, excellent book. She is the co-host of Don't Write That Book, another podcast you've got to listen to if you're writing a book. But if you had to go back to the beginning of you have a long book career. What is one thing about marketing that you would have told your prior self? One thing that, wow, if I knew that then, what I know now, that would have helped.
I wish I would have taken more care in building a mailing list. Honestly, I think it's just an incredible asset. So I wish I would have been more proactive about it.
Okay, there you have it. Get that list going. You need a mailing list. Thank you, AJ, so much. And for everybody else, I'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Path to the Main Stage. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for full video episodes, check out YouTube. If you want to be a successful speaker, you need to make it happen. My co-hosts and I are here to help guide you. But if you need more help, please check out pathtothemainstage.com where we can connect. And until next time, keep sharing your voice, keep showing up, and keep taking your path to the main stage.